They've given their word, their commitment to the president that in the coming weeks there will be a change in momentum.
National Security Council promises drastic approach at effectively securing lives and property.
Federal government talks tough, says no more condoning of media publicizing terrorist activities.
The NBC, they're also aware of these two incidents, and I can assure you that there will be consequences.
Kano State High Court sentences killers of late Hanifa Abubakar to death.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss the state of the Nigerian economy.
All right, there is no doubt that world economies are going through very, very tough times indeed. All across the world, governments are re-strategizing to shape up their economies.
Now, reports indicate that two leading world economies, that's to say the United States and of course the UK, but in terms of numbers, it will be the UK, it will be the US and China. But the US and the UK are heading towards what's been described as a double-digit inflation rate. For the US is 9.1% and the UK 9.4%. The global economic outlook appears to be significantly getting bleak and unpredictable, as recent reports from the International Monetary Fund says that the world may soon be on the edge of a global recession 2 years after the last one.
And the difference between those economies we've just mentioned and Nigeria is the trend. Now, with headline inflation rate put at 18.6%, as the Central Bank of Nigeria kicked in its monetary policy with a new rate of 14%, up by 100 basis points to, of course, address inflation.
Well, the effects of that policy may not be evident in the immediate term, but there are indications that the problem might be no light at the end of the tunnel. Now, this is going by the draft medium-term expenditure framework approved by the Federal Executive Council.
Mind you, it's still a draft copy, but the parameters would include crude price benchmark of $70 barrels per day in 2023 and $66 barrels per day in 2024 and $62 barrels per day in 2025. And of course, crude oil production rate is expected to be 1.6 million barrels per day in 2023 and 1.813 million barrels per day in 2024 and 2025.
Well, the nominal GDP, or the size of the economy, is also expected to grow to over 225 trillion naira, with the non-oil sector said to be accounting for 95% of the growth.
Now, the Minister of Finance also indicated that the 2022 budget performed very well and steady before April. But the question is, what is the security for these projections without prerequisite structures?
And those structures we talk about are not necessarily derived from an economy which is largely controlled by persons who are reliant on importation.
Exactly, Kingsley. And just to drive home our conversation with the words of Wendell Berry, and it says such economy that is genuinely local and neighborly, again, we're talking about being domestic, offers to localities, that's to the people, a measure of security, and as successful economies thrive on improved workforce, ease of doing business, and of course, the necessary infrastructure to aid business production. So in today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria, we shall focus attention on the state of our economy.
Well, let's push aside those numbers we read in the meantime and then ask ourselves a basic question. How is the economy affecting you? And how is the economy affecting your family? How is the economy affecting your business if you run a business? That business could be in the private sector or in the public sector. Headline inflation is well over 18%, as we have indicated, but food inflation, of course, is much higher, and we have seen also the scarcity of basic fuel. This includes diesel and also petrol. They have epileptic supply in major cities like Lagos and Abuja, but more particularly here for us in the Federal Capital Territory. And the aviation sector is also heavily impacted. There's scarcity, for instance, of Jet A1, and there is also scarcity of Forex to enable the airline operators keep afloat. It was a conversation we had on Good Morning Nigeria today. So all around us, the exchange rate, of course, is being pressured. Well, in the I and E, that's the import and export arrangement, it's around about 410 or thereabout. But the parallel rate is galloping virtually on a daily basis. So what's happening to the economy and what can be done to pull back and ensure that things get better for all of us? I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join Claire to welcome you also to this edition of the program, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. In the course of the program, we have our regular complimentary segments. This will include newspaper review of business. Here is Aunt Jimono right away with the highlights of the morning news. Morning, Aunt.
Yeah, good morning, Kingsley and Claire. Here's the morning news. Good morning. A robust national beneficial ownership database has been implemented by Nigeria for deployment towards supporting domestic resource mobilization and combating illicit financial flows, as well as terrorism financing. President Muhammadu Buhari stated this while granting audience to a delegation from the Open Government Partnership Support Unit led by the Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Sanjay Pradhan.
That one of the reasons we have made this much progress is because we have backed our verbal commitments with deliberate action by including OGP implementation in the national budget to ensure sustainability of the partnership in Nigeria.
You have shown me another dimension of openness. Globally, not enough is recognized on what Nigeria has done under your leadership. We remain determined to give visibility of that.
The recent meeting of the National Security Council has ended in Abuja with a firm assurance to Nigerians that there will no longer be a hiding place for any criminal gang to threaten lives and property, as well as the stability and corporate existence of the country. The National Security Advisor, Babagana Mungono, who briefed journalists after the meeting, promised a drastic change in approach and momentum in the renewed effort at effectively securing Nigeria for sustainable socio-economic development.
So I've made a commitment that we've already started working on a new strategy to deal with these snippets of violence. And they've given their word, their commitment to the president that in the coming weeks, there will be a change in momentum.
In the meantime, the federal government says it will not condone media organizations who take delight in broadcasting interviews with bandits and terrorists, thereby making them look as heroes. Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed stated this while briefing the media in Abuja.
The NBC, they're also aware of these two incidents. They are looking at which part of the broadcasting code which parts have been violated by both the BBC and the Daily Trust. And I can assure you that there will be consequences.
A High Court of the Federal Capital Territory has granted bail to the suspended Accountant General of the Federation, Ahmed Idris, and 2 others. The presiding judge, Justice Adeyemi Ajayi, gave the ruling on the defendants' bail applications. The first defendant, who is the suspended Accountant General of the Federation, is granted bail in the sum of 5 billion naira with 2 sureties, one of whom must be a permanent secretary, while the other must be a director. The former Accountant General of the Federation, along with Godfrey Olusegun Akindele, Mohammed Kudu Usman, and Gezawa Commodity Marketing Exchange Limited, were arraigned by the EFCC on the 22nd of this month on a 14th-count charge with borders on alleged stealing and criminal breach of trust to the tune of more than 109 billion naira. And the Kano State High Court, presided by Justice Usman Nababa, has sentenced the killers of late Hanifa Abubakar, Abdulmalik Tanko, and Hashim Ishaku to death by hanging. Mohammed Ali reports that the third defendant, Fatima Jibril, is to serve 2 years jail term.
We thank Almighty God, justice has prevailed.
There is no doubt that Nigeria is taking crucial steps towards the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. What is in doubt, however, is whether the 2030 target is realizable in the wake of the economic, political and security situation, as well as health challenges ravaging countries around the world, Nigeria inclusive. Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals, Adejoke Owolope Adefulere, says with the support and cooperation of all Nigerians, the 17-point development program as designed by government can still be achieved.
By standalone programs and projects, they must be carefully integrated into national and sub-national policies and development plans. Currently, we have integrated the SDG into Nigeria National Development Plan 2021 to 2024, and work is ongoing on 2025 to 2030.
The General Assembly of the Christian Association of Nigeria, CAN, has elected Dr. Daniel Oku as the new president of CAN. Dr. Oku was unanimously elected at the 12th CAN General Assembly to take over from Dr. Samson Olasupo Ayokunle, who ran the affairs of the association since 2016. Dr. Daniel Oku will now head the office of CAN for the next single tenure of 5 years following a change in CAN's constitution, where the tenure of president ran for 3 years and could be re-elected for a second term. In his acceptance speech, the new CAN president pledged to work for unity of purpose with the growth of Christians and progress of Nigeria.
We'll continue to dialogue and engage with the Islamic people of the Islamic religion. They are our brothers, they are our sisters. We all live in this country.
No matter how good you are, you can't spend more than your 5 years and go. So this has engendered peace and love.
Well, that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Claire and Kingsley after this break.
All right, welcome back. This is Good Morning Nigeria, and today we're looking at the state of Nigeria's economy. But for now, let's talk a bit of business. And the federal government says it will address challenges undermining food production in the country. For details, here is Alika Opanachi Arwa.
Prices of food items have been on the rise in recent time, and this has been linked to miscellaneous challenges faced by farmers. The federal government is now assuring farmers it will surmount the challenge of insecurity and give food production a priority, with a pledge that government will equally deploy agro-rangers across the country to protect the farmers. Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Dr. Muhammad Abubakar, who disclosed this in Abuja, emphasized that the quest to diversify the economy, with agriculture playing a pivotal role, is still very much on course. Let's take a look at Thursday tradings on the floor of the exchange. With business news, Alika Opanachi Arwa.
Thank you very much, Alika, for the business package on Good Morning Nigeria. Coming up next for us now is newspaper review. All right, our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atoyobi, is right here with us in the studios for the review session. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kinsile. Good morning. Good morning, Claire.
Okay, we have a copy of the Punch newspaper as well as Blueprint. Let's take a look at the window page of Blueprint newspaper. On the front page of it, you have a number of stories there on the current security situation in the country. Buhari attack. Guards Brigade killed 30 terrorists. That's attributed to Defense Headquarters. And a number of riders there assures Abuja residents, rescue 2 Chibok girls, 2016 insurgents surrender. Federal government threatens Trust TV and BBC with sanctions over documentary. Now the lead story is a double-decker headline, Nigeria in very difficult situation and citizens tired, says NSA. NSA stands for National Security Advisor. Cautions elite and the media on utterances and reportage, says armed forces working on new strategies. Buhari not aware of abduction threat. That's according to the Kaduna State Governor El-Rufai. Let's bomb them out of existence, not waiting to be attacked before responding. Well, that's not attributed to anyone, but you can find out the details on page 6 there. Also on the front page there, contractors settled for NYC contracts, and reps join Senate threatening to impeach Buhari. That's the story that's been on for a couple of days now. And then you have at the foot of the front page there, just above that advert, a strip advert says federal government explains withdrawal of $35.6 million from excess crude account. And telecom subscribers to pay 5% tax on call, text, data, and others. That's according to the federal government. Hanifa, that's the kicker. Court sentences killer teacher to death in Kano. Clerk.
Okay, let's quickly take a look at the front page of the Punch, which is quite busy this morning. And we're starting with the presidential primaries, the lead story. Buhari's ex-minister asks court to disqualify Tinubu and Atiku. It's on page 2. Nwajuba falls APC PDP primaries over statutory delegates vote buying, says former Lagos governor ex-VP bribed delegates with dollars. And the picture story, killings, lawmakers knock Buhari, president meets security chiefs. And you can see the picture stories of the meeting right there. Details of that story on page 2. Other stories trending at the foot of the paper. Katsina, Kwara, Gombe declare holidays for PVC collection. Details of that on page 8. Kano school proprietor to die for killing people on page 5. You heard that report this morning in the news. And 18,429 test positive for hepatitis in Nasarawa. According to the Commissioner for Health, I guess, page 15. You can read about that. Now, 109 billion naira embezzlement, ex-accountant general orders secure bail. It's on page 12. A bit above the nameplates now. 78,549 aggrieved contributors dump PFAs transfer 227 billion naira. Details of that is on page 21. Now, federal government begins implementation of NDDC forensic audit. 4.7 million dead SIMs after FG's coal ban on page 19. And ADAX workers begin strike. Oil production sheds 22,000 barrels per day. Details of that on page 19. Passengers grown as 1 hour flight hits 75,000 naira. Bayo.
Thank you, Claire. Well, security reports dominate the stories, and therefore we cannot run away from the fact that there is excessive concern about the level of security and insecurity in the nation. This is why the National Security Council says that it is working on new strategies to curtail the increasing insecurity and address the concerns of Nigerians. The National Security Advisor, after the National Security Council meeting yesterday, expressed the concern of and decisions of the council. He says council is now going to take new strategies to curtail the menace of insecurity. There will also be renewed momentum against terrorists. Council is, according to the National Security Advisor, is working on investigations as regards the Kuje Correctional Center, and consequently negligence will attract accountable consequence. Major General Babagana Mongono urged Nigerians to volunteer information and also enjoin them to also admonish the media to exhibit utmost caution, especially in what they report. He also talked about political leaders. I said they must weigh what they utter, their utterances, because what they say goes a long way in affecting the wider society. The Honorable Minister of Information, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, has also expressed profound concern about documentaries featured by two media, the Trust TV under the auspices of Media Trust, as well as the BBC. The two media featured documentaries on bandits. The Honorable Minister says that it is very inappropriate, and therefore the appropriate regulatory agency, the National Broadcasting Commission, is already looking into their books for the appropriate sanction to be imposed. The minister drew attention to the fact that BBC, as a reputed international media, will not dare do what it is doing in Nigeria, in the United Kingdom. And he recalls that during the IRA days, in fact, it was an offense to give publicity to any member of the IRA. I remember the Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, said that media is the oxygen upon which terrorism thrives, and therefore it was illegal to even interview anybody who had any relation with IRA on the British media. And so the Honourable Minister says that the BBC must take responsibility for what they have done. In the other area of concern, the military headquarters has confirmed that as many as 30 terrorists were neutralized between Sunday and Tuesday, when troops were called upon to help about terrorists invading Buhari area. Unfortunately, 6 officers paid the supreme sacrifice in the process, but a combination of the activities of the gas brigades, the 167 special task force, as well as the air component, took the battle to the place. They decimated the camps of the terrorists, and as many as 30 of them were neutralized. However, they have also advised that the armed forces is undaunted and ensure all Nigerians that their life and property is safe, while also enjoining them that people should endeavor to provide information to security. In other words, if you see anything, say something so that you can help the security. Meanwhile, the Honorable Commissioner for Police for FCT has raised an alarm because there were information that were speculated on the social media that there were gunshots that were held at Dantata Bridge, Ministers Hill, and along airports along Lube. The FCT Police Command sent out its intelligence crew and they found that it was false. And the minister of the commissioner for police for FCD, Mr. Sunday Babaji, has directed that they should trace the source of that information and ensure that such things don't happen again. There's also advice to all Nigerians that when you get information, be circumspect about it before you circulate or post it on the social media. Now, at last, the long arm of the law has caught up with the proprietor of Noble Kids College, Abdul Malik Tanku, who snuffed the life out of young Hanifa, 5-year-old girl who had all hope to be a brilliant future Nigerian. The Kano State High Court found him guilty of kidnapping, concealment, and culpable homicide. Consequently, he was sentenced to death by hanging. His other accomplice, Hashim Ishaku, is also to die by hanging. The third defendant, Fatima Musa, is sentenced to 2 years imprisonment. The parents of Hanifa say that as far as they are concerned, they are still reeling with the loss of their daughter. However, the cost of justice has been served. Some religious news now. The Christian Association of Nigeria now has a new president. He is Archbishop Daniel Oko. He succeeds Dr. Samson Ayokule. Archbishop Oko, who was elected by at the Congress of the 12th General Assembly, where 259 delegates voted, and he secured all the votes to become the president of CAN. His term is one single term of 5 years. Also in Kano and Osun, Monday has been declared as public holidays to mark the first of Muharram, the first day of the lunar or Islamic calendar. Meanwhile, Kaduna State declared 3 days public holiday from July 27 to 29 to allow public servants who probably have not been able to complete their voter registration to do so. And currently, Kwara, Ogun, Osun, and other states have also declared today public holiday to encourage civil servants to go and collect their PVC. Yeah, I'm done.
Yes, I'm done as well. I don't think I have any other item to review. I don't know if Kinsley does.
No, but that's not. We haven't reviewed any item. We just read all the story.
There's concern raised about the role of the media in reporting during crisis, especially terrorism, and I think it is important that it's been attention should be drawn to it. There should. Facts are sacred. Comments are free. We have gotten an era of a situation whereby comments are put across as information, and it is heightening the anxiety in society, and people are alarmed. Media has a primary responsibility of stating facts as they are and standing by them, defending those facts, but not necessarily pandering into area whereby you see commentaries published as if they are facts. And they are just opinions expressed. Sometimes they are very, very much unfounded.
Well, you were talking about the minister's reaction,
yes,
to the documentary broadcast by the BBC with regard to what the minister said was the glorification of terrorists. And he then cited the example of IRA. And anyone who is of age will remember the Irish Republican Army and the activities that they carried on, particularly in the 80s and 90s. Of course, all of that ended with the Good Friday Agreement, but IRA remains declared a terrorist organization in the United Kingdom. Now, at the height of their activities, in the UK, you couldn't be quoting officials of the IRA. You couldn't be celebrating.
You couldn't even interview the person.
I want to make a point. At the time, Jerry Adams, who was of the IRA, was going to the United States. And the UK government had genuine concerns as to whether the American media relied on the First Amendment to the US Constitution, which guarantees freedom of the press, would ventilate the views of Jerry Adams. And they reached an agreement with the U.S. government that, yes, I mean, the media could interact with him, but they couldn't quote him directly. Which was, if anybody who knows the First Amendment jurisprudence in the U.S. would wonder how that occurred. But of course, that was the way it went. And I don't know how many U.S. media organizations have been celebrating Osama bin Laden or Zawahiri, who was Osama bin Laden's second in command, or any of those terror suspects on whose trail the American forces have been. That's one. The second point, I think that sometimes greater caution is required. Just about 3 years ago, Daily Trust also ran into troubled waters. Daily Trust newspaper published on its front page stories relating to operational deployment and movement of Nigerian troops in the northeast. And I'm sure Barry will remember this. That the military moved into the offices of Daily Trust here in Abuja, where they have their headquarters, demanding more and, of course, more additional information as to what they knew. And there was quite some furor then as to the endangerment of Nigerian troops. I would did say that on that occasion that no matter how desperate you are, no matter how cocksure you are about your story, matters relating to troop deployment isn't one for the media to ventilate. But in this case, it relates to the glorification of terrorists. There is a view that says, oh, they have done this documentary, so they have also exposed the faces of the terrorists so you can see them and then you can know them, and so on and so forth. They have given their views and all that. That's one view that has been expressed. But as the minister has indicated, if this is an attempt at giving oxygen, as it were, to persons who are levying war against the Nigerian state, then the Nigerian state has every right to defend itself and uphold its laws.
I'm glad you cited this story about the Daily Trust. There was actually a report by a Daily Trust reporter that a garrison of the Nigerian army had been overrun in the northeast. The army headquarters came to deny that it was not true. And to justify that their report was true, they now published the plan of the Nigerian army to move into that territory to defend it. And if you do that in journalism, you are exposing the security strategy of the army. You are dabbling into security threats, and no armed forces or police anywhere, security agents will take such very, very lightly. And those are the danger, the minefields that journalism should not stray into.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the Daily Trust ordinarily is a reputable organization, but sometimes you have to worry about gatekeeping. How some of these stories slip by. Only the Jonathan years, for instance. I mean, I remember one headline that they cast, Axis of Death, which was in the northeast. It was a front page story, talking about the conflict that was ongoing and the reign of terrorists. Another headline was talking about hunters during the fight against terrorists, and implying that the Nigerian troops were on the retreat. So I think these are some of the things that you have to worry about. There are ways you can embed the stories inside the paper, but once you have the shattering headlines that way, then you draw attention to it and what is it meant to accomplish. That's one. The second one has to do with the judgment that was delivered by the Kano High Court. This is again pretty very swift. Within 7 months, because the incident occurred in December last year, 2021, within 7 months there has been trial and then judgment delivered. We praise the Kano State High Court for the speed with which this matter was handled, no needless adjournment. We also praise the prosecution and then also praise the defense counsel, because it wasn't as if they were just put there in the dock and then summarily convicted. They had an opportunity of defending themselves, and we do hope that the course of justice has been served, and if they do exhaust whatever processes they may wish to pursue, that's fine. And if the judgment of the Court of First Instance is still upheld, the next thing will be to be sure that the law is also observed in carrying out the sentence passed by the State High Court. Yes. You murdered a 5-year-old puppy If you recall the circumstances, I mean, let's not get into details of that. That child was fed with rat poison, and then you collected 6 billion naira from the parents of the girl.
It's most cruel. Most cruel. The good thing about it is that the prosecution was very thorough, and the High Court, in fact, even expurgated the wife of the man who has been convicted, because he was actually joined in the case, but she had no role to play there, and she was set free.
All right, well, thank you. We'll see you next week. All right, this is Good Morning Nigeria. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As a prompt for our conversation this morning, let's listen into this background report put together by our correspondent, Oyemi Ajayi.
Economists have often regarded savings as an important part of wealth creation, with the belief that a disciplined and regular savings culture could over time lead to accumulated wealth. Drastic rise in prices of goods and services in Nigeria today means that the average citizen is grappling to meet daily requirements with little or nothing left to save. Issues of rising food prices, cooking gas, transportation, house rent, and depreciation of naira against the dollar are some of the problems digging holes in the pockets of Nigerian citizens. Experts say reasons for the present economic downturn is rooted in the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, global inflation, Russia-Ukraine war, as well as domestic security concerns. Finding ways out of this situation is now a national assignment, and on Wednesday, the federal government approved the Medium-Term Expenditure Framework 2023 to 2025. The document describes Nigeria's socio-economic development objectives and priorities for the next 3 years. Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, explained that the assumptions made for the next medium-term framework is that crude oil price will be at $70 per barrel for 2023, $66 for 2024, and $62 for 2025. The document, however, projected a rise in the nominal GDP up to 225.5 trillion naira, with 95% contribution coming from the non-oil sector, while the oil sector will be contributing only 5%. How will the medium-term expenditure framework tilt the balance in Nigeria's favor? On this episode of Good Morning Nigeria, experts will be speaking on the state of the economy.
All right, that was a background report put together by correspondent Ekene Ndele. Joining us here in the studio to discuss the topic, and just a reminder, it's State of Nigerian Economy. We have Professor Ken Ife, who is a development economist and also international development consultant. He's right here with us. Thank you very much for
Thank you for having me.
All right, Kingsley.
Okay, we have from our Kaduna Network Center, the regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria. That's Professor Yushau Ango. Yushau Ango is a professor of finance and entrepreneurship, as well as dean of the School of Postgraduate Studies at the Kaduna State University. Professor Ango, we're glad to have you on the program this morning.
My pleasure. Good morning.
Okay, we're expecting another guest to be with us via Zoom. Once we are able to get him online, we will we'll bring him on. But let's begin with Professor Yushau Ango. Ango and Kenneth, of course, are regular guests on Good Morning Nigeria. Professor Yushau Ango, what's happened to the Nigerian economy?
A lot is happening, and a lot is also happening to the global economy. The challenges are numerous, among other things, there is the issue of that we faced in 2016 and 2020 of recession. We came out of it. The recession of 2020 was an outcome of the COVID-19 episode, and in which the economy was closed for a number of months. Now, of recent, we were having the effect of that and the effect of the Russian-Ukrainian war also having impact itself. Now, basically, the major components in which we can see challenges, obviously, in the issue of growth or otherwise of GDP. Thank God for the last 4 or 5 quarters, we have had reasonable or at least minimal growth in that respect. Now, on the other side, another area in which to look is the issue of inflation. Inflation is rising, and the report of Nigerian Bureau of Statistics in the month of June shows that in the month of June the growth was about 18.6% or thereabout. Now, that is a major concern for the economy. Another major concern, and that also particularly was occasioned by rise in food prices, and also especially the prices of energy, among other major factors. That is one. Another area in which the Nigerian economy is facing concern is the issue of debt repayment or servicing of the debt. Actually, servicing of the debt is the issue. The quantum of debt, the Nigeria, the debt to GDP ratio is very low. It's 23 to less than 24%, which is very reasonable compared to many countries now globally. But then the issue is that of servicing, or the ratio of the debt service relative to the revenue associated with it. Now, all of these are happening while there are also challenges of security, which we are all familiar with. Now, the only consolation, if any, if there is any consolation in all of these, is the fact that this is a global phenomenon, and it's actually even much worse in many countries globally. Even here in Africa, the impact of Ukrainian-Russian war, for example, is felt much more in Egypt or Tunisia. The issue of debt crisis is felt much more in countries like South Africa or Ghana. So this is a global phenomenon. The fact we have always been saying that the fact that there was the fact that there was COVID-19, which later on led to recession, means that we cannot just pick up from where we stopped. We did very well in coming out of the recession, but then these are consequences that the global economy is facing, and Nigeria is not exempt from that consequence.
Thank you, Madam Ango, for your analysis. We have Professor Ken Ife here, who is a developmental consultant and development economist, and I'd like to look at it from the point of the report released by the NBS, of course, which gives us a breakdown of the dynamics in the economy over last year. And based upon the report, it says that there was an improvement by 2.6% over last year's 0.51% growth. Can you break that? What does that mean for the ordinary Nigerian?
Let me start from, this is price. When inflation is price, forex is price, MPR rates, interest rates, they're all price. And in any price equation, there are demand and supply factors that will have to come in. I want to come down. The global situation, Nigeria is, because of our import dependence, Nigeria is at a trajectory where it is affected by any movement on the global supply chain. Anything, be it COVID, be it currency, it is affected. Because whatever we are importing is subject, so we are on the transmission belt of global supply chain. Now, what that means in effect is that America If you look at mid-January, there's an index, USD Index, which measures the strength of American dollar to a basket of currencies, yen, euro, pounds. That was about 94.5, that index in mid-January. Now it's about 107 and is heading out in the next 3-6 months to 115. That means American dollar has gained strength at the expense of all other currencies. It's even 1-to-1 with euro. Now, because we are on that transmission belt, we are going to take the hit. And we're already seeing that in our dollar to Nigerian naira jumping to 7.110. So that is that. Now, what does it affect? It affects everything. It affects inflation. It affects because don't forget that with the NNPC palaver, we are now having to look for 500 billion naira every month to subsidize. That means government will borrow more money to pay for subsidy. Borrowing more money means we are going to have more debt service. That is going to increase. And the money government has to spend is going to reduce. Now, connected to your question about GDP figures.
Yes.
There are four components. There are four components of that GDP. You have the external sector, which I've just described. You have the household consumption. We have fought to keep household consumption in 2020, and that's why we got out of recession. We have the business. Now, the business is investment, because they are the ones that are investing. Without investment, nothing happens. Then we now have government expenditure. Government expenditure is taking a knock from my last statement, and that is even going to get worse because it's not going to have the cash to spend on capital projects where jobs are created. So it's just going to be like managing poverty. And 22% of the budget of this year is on security. And then you can now see what has been said about the proportion of government revenue that is going to servicing debt. And of course, you know that quite a lot of trillions have been spent by way of overdraft to federal government. So we have still more storm in the horizon, but it's not a hopeless situation. We have growth, which is actually the good news, that the projections on growth have been maintained by IMF and World Bank. IMF is still confident that 3.6% growth will continue. And I'm confident that it will continue. But that growth does not undermine the fact that the inflation is quite high and is biting on the household and whoever is needing to spend money. Our minimum wage hasn't moved. But look at those composite of those 4 indices that I've mentioned to you, those 4 subsectors. And that's how you come to a resolution of why would we be having growth when we are suffering on all the other areas. But of course, there are primary sectors as well, because if you look, I looked at it as composition, but if you look at it at primary sector, you have agriculture doing well, over 20%, but not with a rate that is over our population growth. You have in industries, which is already around 20 as well, and then you have this service sector that is about 54-55%. So service sector is driving growth because ICT is over 16% of the GDP, trade is over 16% of GDP, finance, and all of those, they are all pushing and drawing growth. And the non-oil sector is posting 95% or more of the growth, while the oil sector is only about 5% in terms of composition. And they are still sub-zero in terms of their growth rate. So what is driving us in the non-oil sector? And that's why you can connect to the CBN current program on RT $200 billion.
Okay, Professor Ken, before we bring in an angle again, we've had this for many years, that Nigeria is an import-dependent economy and therefore susceptible to shocks in the external environment, such as supply chain disruptions. We saw that during COVID, and now, to an extent, we're also seeing it in the Russian-Ukraine war. All the measures that have been taken over the past decades, and including recent years, what impact have those measures had on weaning us off import dependency and ensuring that at least there's some domestic production that will mitigate the reliance or the consequences of a reliance on excessive importation?
Well, there will be a series of measures, but I can tell you there are some that have
proven more effective than the others. Nobody disputes today, after what we saw in 1974-75 of cement scandal. We had a backward integration program of Obasanjo's administration, and Dangote led that program, and we are no longer importing cement at all. We are actually now a net exporter of cement.
And the price of cement, and the bag of cement is not less than 4,000.
Yeah, but it is different. We are not consuming our forex we don't have in importing that. We've seen in 2017 when everything that could happen on currency stability just couldn't happen. And then the CBN had to switch to demand management to restrict 41 items, and then said it's not enough to restrict it, because whatever you doesn't amount, however money you give to Federal Ministry of Agriculture, they will not deal with the size of the problem. So we are going to intervene in agriculture. And we have seen how Anchor Borrowers Program has dealt with rice. Rice was a key embarrassment to us. We haven't got 100% yet, but we are very close. So you have seen how cement has been tackled decisively, rice has. Many others like wheat needs to get the same level of attention, and a few other products. Now that is where you are having decisive traction. But we need more. In the area of revenue, it's not about the debt. The debt level is still sustainable in terms of numbers. But the revenue, we have to do something about the revenue. We are doing something, because at 7% government revenue to GDP, we are the lowest in Africa and 1/3 of the average. Average is 18%. ECOWAS macroeconomic convergence criteria says 20%. We are still at 1/3. It's like a trailer, a 40-foot trailer being driven by the engine of Volkswagen. So we are underpowered, heavily underpowered, 3 times than where we should be. So whilst I recognize constant amendment of the Finance Acts and all of those movements, and then the drive to raise revenue, we need to also plug some other holes. And those holes are very, very critical, because the bag is leaking right now. We have seen determination on the side of the fiscal authority to curtail the waivers, because those waivers were becoming significant. And then we have seen how PIA has removed the hand of NNPC on the tail, because their hands were on the tail. They receive this, they receive that, and then they spend and then give some chicken change to governors to come and share every month. Now they can't share, there's nothing to share. But now it has even moved from that to, all right, we are the sole importer and exporter of this crude and oil. Now government, it costs us more to bring up to PMS. So the balance, which is called under recovery, is $500 billion every month. Don't borrow that. So what I'm saying in effect is that we have serious challenge around balancing our books. And that does not detract from sustained effort to tackle individual backward integration agenda, which is really the ultimate. And now when you see a program as bold as RT $200 billion over the next 3 years, we have to take that kind of program seriously. And you cannot say it's in the air. It cannot be in the air, because there is a base of a restructuring of the agricultural production system, with 5 million farmers getting loan without security. There's the number 100 for 100 PPP, where any company that means business to manufacture for export, come and take 5 billion naira. And they will now have the one at the highest sector saying, I want to earn $200 billion. Let's make it happen. So there's a continuum and there's a strategy, but these things have to accelerate in pace. And it has to be complemented by other measures. Now, I'll give you one example of the measure. One example is this. We have said 41 items, you can't ban them, but I can't give you foreigners because I don't have it. I want the fiscal authority to use levy instrument to up the effective duty. Not by changing CET, we are bound by the conventional tariff, but also to widen those to maybe 50 items. We have to do something to send a strong signal. If you want to be important, look, our balance of trade with China is over 2 trillion.
Prof, let me just put you on.
Pay more tax to government if you want to keep importing those frivolous items.
One thing I like about you, development economist and economic analyst, you talk big grammar for us. So mine is just to make sure that the viewer understands what we're talking about. And my next question will go to Professor Ango. Professor Ango, please make sense of this issue. How can the non-oil sector be contributing 95%, the non-oil sector, and the oil sector is, bringing in only 5%, and then we are still heavily import driven? I mean, I don't know. Where is our diversification drive?
Diversification is working. Just like Prof said, it's working in the sense that if you remember, historically, dependence was on oil. So in a way, we are shifting from that. What is happening, for the non-oil sector to contribute 95% of the economy, looking at it from the perspective of GDP, that is very impressive. And that shows we are really moving away from depending on oil. What we are depending on oil more on is the issue of foreign exchange. A lot of our foreign exchange comes from oil related, but a number of activities are taking place. Like Prof said, especially the service sector is contributing more to the economy. So there is sustainability, there is more resilience, if you like, expected of the economy now that we are widening the pie, if you like. So that is happening, is a reality, but unfortunately our reliance on this product, especially as it affects foreign exchange, is the issue. Now another thing also related to the question you asked, Prof, is the issue of successes that have been achieved. We have achieved substantially, like Prof said, especially on agriculture and cement. Hopefully very soon we'll also be able to have this achievement with regards to petroleum processing, at least when the Dangote petroleum comes online. And that will also reduce pressure on foreign exchange and on imports. But I believe, every Nigerian should understand that the economy is much larger than just oil. The economy has a lot to do with production, manufacturing, but especially the service sector, and especially the ICT sector and finance sector, that are now coming up and doing very well. Even during COVID, if you remember, even when we had a recession, those sectors were among the sectors that more or less bailed us out. So that is the reality of the economy. But, what people feel most always is the inflation in particular, and prices, and that is true. And that is unfortunately going to continue for a while, because the reality is that there are certain steps we need to take, but taking them will fuel the inflation even more. So poverty in the short term, I think, is bound to increase, and unfortunately we are the poverty capital of the world. So those are the consequences we are likely going to face in the next few months and probably few years.
Professor Yusuf Ango, how do you explain to the person on the street that while we have attained self-sufficiency in cement production, the price of cement today is at least 4,000 naira for a 50 kilogram bag, and that has a lot of consequences on the construction sector of the economy? How do you also explain to the person on the street that yes, we've ramped up domestic production of rice, but a bag of rice today is more expensive than it was like 10 years ago when we were heavily dependent on rice importation? So again, this could be a basket of prices, but it is the impact on the pocket that the individual is unable to understand. And some people are already asking the question, if we attain self-sufficiency even in petroleum refining, what guarantee is there that the price will not be higher or be the highest elsewhere than elsewhere in the world? So how do we make sense of this?
I believe that is a concern to every Nigerian. However, I believe the issue, especially for cement, would be probably to look at the costs, the various cost lines as it affects the production. There are costs that are rising. But nonetheless, there are two extremes. One extreme is to allow market forces, to determine prices, as is the case in any capitalist economy. Another approach is to say, okay, let's put in some price control. Perhaps there is need, to sensitize the producers and see wherever we can reduce that tendency. But then I'm sure their concern will be their various costs, lines and things like that. Now, as it affects food, especially rice, I have said in this program earlier that yes, the price of rice now is higher than it was 10 years ago. The price of everything is higher than what it was 10 years ago. Globally, and especially the Nigerian situation as it affects inflation is a reality. Inflation is a reality, it has happened. But if you look at the price, in the market, let's say from last year to this year, despite the inflation, the price did not rise as much as it could. And I only say that we are even lucky that it did not rise as much, which means the supply is much, that there is quantum of these food materials available in the market. Otherwise, sincerely, the story would have been much more different. I can give you examples of many products. The farmer, what he looks at is anytime he's producing, when the farmer is costing, the farmer look at, okay, what is the price of, for example, fertilizer, which is a major input that they use. If the price of one bag of, let's say, 100 kg of paddy rice will not buy you one bag of fertilizer, then there are issues there. And that is what is happening now. That was not the case 2-3 years ago. The case was that when you sell a bag of maize, you can buy a bag of fertilizer at least, or even more, or maybe even have some change. Now the case has reversed. What is happening is that you need to sell probably 2 bags of maize to now get one bag of fertilizer, which is just 50 kg. Now this is the reality, and it did not change between last year and this year, despite the fact that we are crying about the prices. I'm saying that the reality is that it could have been even worse if prices have risen. And another thing to take note of, and which we should thank God for, is the fact that obviously we have sufficient, or at least we have a reasonable volume of food, despite our level of poverty in the country. Maybe affordability may be an issue, but then the food is there, because otherwise, if it's not there, the prices will have been much more, especially given what happened to it, because when it comes to food, when you don't have this particular food that you want, you will go for the next one as an alternative. And if the others are not rising as much as one will have expected, then it means that we have some reasonable quantum of these products available in the market, and we should thank God for that. And I believe that is probably why the inflation is not even as high as it is in some neighboring countries.
Professor Ango, thank you. We're back here at Professor Ken Ife. Prof, if you look back for quite a while now, we've not heard much about clashes between farmers. There seems to be some stability, and of course farmers are going to the farm, they're producing and all that. And I want to believe that that's the reason why we still have we can boast of adequate food supplies and all that. But if we are having farmers having some stability in terms of planting, harvesting and production, we expect that there will be improved productivity. And then if we have that, we expect that there will be surplus food, regardless of the increase in transportation and diesel and all that. The marginal increase shouldn't be as high as it is now. Are farmers taking advantage of the interventions? Are they actually producing?
They are producing. You see, if the price rose in the foodstuff as much as the other inputs, rice would have been 70,000 naira per bag now. Look at fertilizer. Fertilizer has moved from 7,000, 7,500, both urea, 7,000, 8,000 to 25,000. That's 300% increase. They haven't had a 3%, 100% increase in rice and maize. No, it's maybe 50% or 70%. No, not that magnitude. Look at diesel. From just over 200 naira to 850 naira, that's 400% increase. So that should explain why the cement is going up and returning high. Because go to the cement factories, go to where they are, go and look at it. It's not power they are using, because power will come and then 1 hour is going for the day. They are using generators, and these are heavy diesel-based generators. And their price has gone up 400%. So it's very tough out there. It's really tough. And that's what pressured the petrol station to say, look, we can't wait anymore. Because the generator that they use in pumping the fuel is using diesel. The trucks bringing their petrol is using diesel. So they had it up here. And they say, no, they have to increase the price. And then policy have to follow them. That is the reality on the street. We have 5 million farmers that are accessing loan with no collateral, that are producing over 5 million metric ton. They were not feeding 200 million, like we are feeding 300 million people. Because 100 million surrounding us from Frankfurt are buying our food. And our food is very cheap to them. Cheaper by about 60%. Because our currency has gone down and theirs have remained artificially high. Artificially high because the Francophone CFAs are indexed, they are denominated on euro, and they are being artificially maintained at that steady rate by burning their reserves. You can't do that with Nigeria. They won't let you burn. CBN won't let you burn our reserves recklessly just to maintain a price on forex. No. So in a way, these food are cheaper to them. And don't forget that World Food Program, UN World Food Program, is also buying food everywhere they can to feed 20 million refugees all over the. So there are pressure. And Nigeria is a good agroecology to produce food, even though we have conflicts in all the 6 geopolitical zones. But as you described, we are still managing to get by using mechanization and all kinds of things and improve seedling to still hang around there and then return a growth in the agricultural space and a contribution to GDP of about 25-26%. So it's tough, but they are just managing. And that's why they need more support. I rather that we give 1 trillion naira subsidy to agricultural farmers than that we are burning 4 trillion on petrol that you don't even know who is consuming.
You know, Professor Ken Ife and Professor Usha Ango, gentlemen, thanks a lot for the views that you are expressing. Yes, it is true that there is no famine in Nigeria because food is available. Now, the food security is impacted by affordability, such as Professor Usha Ango pointed out, which is why you see the galloping prices. Maybe a basket of tomatoes at some point, even when tomatoes are in season, the price gets out of the road. But let's just seek an understanding of what the dynamics are. You were talking earlier, as an example, Professor Ken Ife, of a bag of fertilizer leaping from about 7,000 naira to 20-something thousand naira. And yet, only a few years ago, we celebrated the fact that in collaboration with the Moroccan government, we had revitalized the fertilizer blending plants throughout the country. So how do you explain the fact that now price of a bag of fertilizer has jumped from about 7,000 to 20-something thousand? Now, we also talked about the price of cement. The price of cement wasn't a function of either COVID or Ukraine war. The price of cement started climbing in 2016. When a bag of 50 kg was less than by 1,600, all of a sudden it went to 2,000 something. From 2,000 something, it went to 3,000, and now it stayed at about 4,000. Nothing whatsoever. They didn't complain at that time about diesel. In fact, before they complained about diesel, the price had already climbed. So I'm just saying, so that when government is, as you rightly pointed out, attacking one sector or attacking one challenge, let it drill down to the very end. And if there are other connecting issues, it should also tackle it. How do we explain the fact that fertilizer blending plants have been rejuvenated, they are up and running, but the bag of fertilizer is so costly?
No, the case of fertilizer, yes, we are getting the phosphate rocks from Morocco, but we still need lime. And I'm sure we have lime deposits in Nigeria and ECOWAS countries, but we have to get to those. At the moment, we are having to import. And then one of the import sources is actually where the trouble is. So you see, there is. And then, of course, when you go into the plant where they are blending, what are they using to power themselves? Is diesel. And that has given you 400% increase in price. Then if you want to transport it, what are you using to transport? It's still trucks that are drinking diesel. My brother, it's not easy. It's just a catch-22 situation that we are having in this country.
No, okay. Professor Yusha Ango, I want you to also come in here, Claire.
Yes, please.
Professor Yusha Ango, in the argument for the removal of petrol subsidy, we were told, for those who would say that, look, this is a waste, it's a drain on government funds, who were subsidizing the rich rather than the poor. But those who would counter the argument would argue that removal of petrol subsidy would have an automatic knock-on effect on prices of goods and services in the rest of the economy, and that petrol was king. But this year, it appears we are now realizing that diesel is actually king. Because I mean, if you look at the examples that Professor Kenife has given, and what we also do know, factories are dependent on diesel, trucks that move petrol are also dependent on diesel. Everyone is crying diesel, diesel, diesel. Did we get it wrong about understanding the low cost of diesel? And diesel was in the past celebrated that, oh, you can see diesel is available because the market has been deregulated. Today now, we are all seeing, as Nigerians will say, we are seeing pepper with diesel.
The decision was the best decision at the time, and I believe it's still the best decision if you put it together. The reality is that even petroleum is supposed to be deregulated the same way. But it's just like we don't, like Prof said, it's a catch-22 situation. If we should do that, because it is reaching a point, the subsidy will have been enormous, will have been too much, for the country, to be able to wither. And I think we have to just face reality. And the subsidy that has just been adjusted in terms of petroleum is a minor adjustment, and there are issues already around that. But I believe we, unfortunately, given our revenue profile, given our level of revenue that government is able to raise, sincerely, we cannot afford to continue to subsidize. That is the reality. And the other problem also related to that is the fact that, like Prof said, just like in food, we are supplying our neighbors. In petroleum-related products, it's even worse. They are actually depending on us. I think, as a country, we need to sincerely, especially our agencies, our various agencies, I'm talking about our security agencies, customs and the like, we have to control our borders. We have to ensure that these products that we are subsidizing with our sweat, and that is affecting us seriously, does not get its way to all these other countries. Now, I want to talk about the issue of fertilizer, because even yesterday I bought some. And I want to tell you that the price is not just 25. Some there are fertilizer that is 18, 19, but there is fertilizer that is also 30,000, depending on brand and things like that. This is the reality of what we are facing now. And like I said earlier, and like Prof said sincerely, if not for the fact that we have sufficient quantum, obviously, of foodstuff. Prices of rice, for example, should have been 30,000. So we have achieved in that regard. But I believe there is more to do, and I believe we don't have the capacity as an economy to continuously subsidize everything, unfortunately. But removing the subsidy will come with a lot of consequences. The thing will be even worse. I don't think we'll be able to shoulder all of it. So we have to, I believe, become more concerned as Nigerians, and everybody should do what he has to do or she has to do, to ensure that we protect our country, we love our country, we do everything possible to ensure that we generate this revenue, because this revenue is available. It's only that it's leaking and probably is not being collected properly. Somebody told me, I was talking to somebody, and he gave the example. He said it's only in Nigeria, in the whole world, where a billionaire will be a very happy person. A billionaire, you can be a billionaire without paying anybody any tax. But we that are working, for example, must pay tax. But a billionaire can exist in Nigeria. He can buy whatever he wants to buy. He can buy houses. He can do this. He can do that, and he's still not paying tax, and he's still getting away with it. This is the country we have, and I think if we want to enjoy many other things, we have to put the interest of this country at heart. Everybody need to do his own or her own part, to ensure that we protect our own interests. We have interests. We have national interests. We should have it. We should not only be individual interest. We should also protect what we have to protect for ourselves. We should collect what must be collected, and perhaps if we do that, then we can then balance the economy and make it work properly. But right now, all of these challenges, sincerely, is certainly because of things that we refuse to do, or some people who are supposed to do things are not doing what they are supposed to do, and that is why we are in the state we are. Probably the situation would have been much better.
Thank you. You felt short of saying that Nigeria is not broke. You said we have the revenue. Probably the revenue is leaking, or we're not collecting what we should be collecting. Professor Ken, I know you want to add to that, but also take along with my question. I like us to evaluate, because the CBN is also helping to implement backward integration, which is, the whole purpose crux of what we're talking about. Backward integration in the area, especially of power and electricity. There are quite a number of interventions that the CBN is implementing, and I want us to know what is wrong with these interventions. Do we need to look, re-strategize, or we need to evaluate the effectiveness? And I'd just like to mention, I know we have the intervention on gas expansion. There's an intervention facility for the National Gas Expansion Program. You remember the conversion from fuel to gas? Yeah. There's also an intervention here I see for solar connection facility. This is in addition to the PPP 100 for 100 policy for production and productivity, and the RTS 200 you talk about. Let's evaluate these policies. What effect do they have on our backward integration, aspiration?
I'll start with the gas. Gas is very important. Very, very important, critical. The gas expansion program is actually Nigeria's transition program, which we will say to the UN under this carbon decarbonization and carbon, but that's how we are going to move to achieve our national target, national determined contribution. And that could help, if only we can speed it up. That will help the transition from diesel to gas. Many of these tankers and trailers and buses should use gas. They should switch to gas. And I don't see why we are not doing this switch. It's just retooling, and there are so many generators coming out now that use gas. They are naira to naira, kg to kg, pound to pound cheaper than using the diesel. So that's when you reduce the demand for this, then you're actually switching demand. And that's what should happen when the prices get very high. We should switch demand. But it's not happening with diesel. We have biodiesel now. It's very, very cheap now, because if you do jet total conversion to biodiesel or any of the normals, they are now cheaper and they can now be very, very effective. You can't sustain this high price of diesel and then expect any magic in the marketplace, because our domestic economy is producing for our economy, and the input cost is phenomenal. It's gone from 20 to about 30% just in energy costs, and then transportation costs has gone higher. And if you want to transport 1 ton of any maize or anything from Katsina to Port Harcourt, it's 100,000 naira a ton just to transport. And then if you look at marginal rises or increase in demand or deduction in demand with changes in price, if you double the price of rice in the northern frontier, the francophone will still buy it because it's still cheaper, 60% cheaper for them, and if you double it, it will be 30% cheaper. But we can't buy the rice if it doubles in price. If the transportation cost increases by 50%, transporting this grain from north to south, it gets out of hand. We can't afford it. But it is not an issue for those from the francophone buying from us, because there are the frontiers there. So the odds are stacked against us. So we've got to switch. We have to use that gas to switch demand to others. And the same way, now you got NNPC, that is now the sole is limited now, and we are still talking about continuing to borrow on debt financing. No, we could stop that. You have to stop that. Why? Look at Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia needed 25 billion. It's as rich as Saudi Arabia is. They wanted $25 billion. They didn't go to World Bank or IMF. They said, oh, well, tell me the value of Saudi Aramco. This is my company. Tell me the value. And when they valued it at 1.5 trillion, oh goodness, take capital market, sell 5%. Straight, easy. You can do that within 3 months or for 6 months at the most. And then they had the money that they wanted. If you look at NNPC, we have given, federal government has given over 800 companies to BPE to privatize. And you know it's taking its own turn. But you've got NNPC now, private company, already, even before they incorporated, Afrexim has given them $5 billion. Saying, vote of confidence, we are looking at your assets. So we have to switch to asset-based financing. So take that asset, value that asset. I reckon is not less than $100 billion. I've heard them saying, oh, it's about 60 billion net. Yeah, it's not less than $100 billion. Just government privatize 40% of that. And make sure that all those people in the Niger Delta, let them buy shares. All the transporters buy shares. All the unions that are screaming they're going to go on strike, buy shares. All the majors buy shares. And that's why we have no problem with LNG and government is getting dividend. Do let them buy shares and have equity. They will stop all the vandalism on the pipeline because they will not, they're expecting their dividend every 6 months. They will not let you touch the pipeline in the Niger Delta. Why? Because they're part owners and they're seeing the money. They're seeing the money. So that will arrest, and then even the borrowing. In normal operation, a private company is a private company. I know they are spending billions of dollars trying to revive one for a refinery or the other. But look at it. If you have an investment to make, because they should be looking at all options. Don't stop what you are doing. Just bring 500 billion out of the $200 billion Nigeria has given you. Just bring 500 and invest 10 in 5. Just in 5 modular refineries, the return you are going to be getting, because these are modular refineries, within 6 months they could be put and they're going to work. 20,000 barrels a day. Just put small money, 20%, so that you can guarantee them crude supply and them offtake. See the difference in revenue. They will mop up some of these workers who are paying salaries for doing nothing. They will give you fuel instantly. And what is it? You are cruising. You are cruising with a win-win.
Well, Professor Ken, thank you very much for the free advice that you are offering. Very interesting, but sometimes the reality can be different. And Claire, you're talking about converting from diesel to gas. The diesel cannot be sustained. The modular refineries you mentioned, we've had conversations around that subject matter on Good Morning Nigeria. And they tell you that the modular refineries, the catalytic unit, are programmed essentially for the production of diesel. How many modular refineries do we have operating at the moment? That's one question. Second question, look at the issues around gas. Why are we having sometimes epileptic power supply with regard to our thermal power stations? Gas supply issues. So again, in terms of an economic policy, fine. But there are usually administrative bottlenecks, and as some would argue, a typical Nigerian factor that could impede the full realization of the otherwise noble objectives that you have mentioned. Plus the fact that you started the LNG program, that's there's no question about it. It's a stellar arrangement that we have. But what is the governance mechanism with regard to LNG? You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation.
All right, welcome back, and you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We're looking at the state of the nation's economy. Professor Ken Ife is right here with us, and Professor Ango is also joining us, of course, from our Kaduna studios, network center. So we were talking about, the effectiveness of some of the policies, that have been implemented to ensure backward integration. And just before we went on break, Kingsley was talking to Professor Ken Ife about certain bureaucracies that may be clogging, the effectiveness of those policies. Professor Ango, what are your views about these policies, and how can alleged or bureaucracies be dealt with?
The policies, like people normally say in this country, we are very good at coming up with policies. Our problem always is in implementing them. I believe, like has been stated, the issue is unfortunately sometimes this thing called Nigerian Factor, which is affecting us. We have so many opportunities, and we have so many initiatives that we have come up with, and each of them alone will somehow bail us out of a number of problems and challenges. Look at, for example, the power sector. Look at how much has been invested from the time of President Obasanjo to date. Look at what has been invested. How many of these GENCOs that have been created are working? And some of them will say because, of course, of gas supply. Gas, like Prof said, has the capacity to turn us around completely. Now, in addition to the fact that is an alternative energy, is quite globally considered to be the next major power or energy source that is expected. We have abundance of it. We need to work seriously on gas, not only on the utilization of gas within the country, which will transform the economy completely, including household expenditure and all that, given what is being spent, in each household on energy, and then also save our forests, and all that. Now, all that is one side. Another side is, imagine how much it will power our industry. And then thirdly, and also very importantly, imagine the revenue that will come out of it. The Ukrainian-Russian war has now made Europe to realize, that they needed countries like Nigeria. And already, I believe, discussions are in top gear, to extend the Ajakuta, Abuja, Kano, Kaduna-Kano gas pipeline down to Morocco, Algeria. Now, these are opportunities, these are initiatives, and I know that, of course, these European countries are in need of us. Probably it will come to pass, and those will completely transform not only our capacity and our economy locally, because this gas pipeline will power industries, will power generating plants, hopefully. It will also now bring a lot of revenue. So a lot of these initiatives are there. A lot of these capacities are there. We are so blessed, but our problem is management. Our problem is that patriotism, which is required of every one of us, so that we also love our country, just like every other person or every other country you go to, they love their country. We are the only people that we feel, all we want to do is to run down our country and then, of course, line our own pockets, and make as much money as possible individually, and then not concerned about the interest of the country as it is. So gas alone is one initiative that can transform this country. Let us just take one item like gas, for example, and now drive it all through and maximize and see what we can get out of it. We have had many false starts in many other sectors, like, for example, on steel. Look at the potential. Look at how we have not been able to, in 30, 40 years, not be able to actually capitalize on it. We have not been able to do it on aluminium, we have not been able to do it in many other sectors. So please, I'm calling on those who have, who are policymakers and who are managers, because these things require management, basic management skills, to ensure that we implement projects and we actually see that these projects work. Gas is one of them that can actually transform this economy locally and then bring in a lot of revenue from international sources.
Professor Yusha Ongo, thank you very much there for your comments. We are all in the decade of gas, as the government announced some time ago. I don't know how many months or years of that decade we have already chalked down. Then we do hope that going forward, there will be many more opportunities to explore once some of these teething administrative challenges are overcome. But But there is a point, gentlemen, that I would like us to touch on. We're on the home stretch of this conversation, but I find it pretty critical. Both of you, you've been our guests over the years. During the 2 recessions that we had, you were amongst our guests, and you also made wonderful, workable solutions that enabled us to come out. The argument I always heard, not just from you, but from others, that Nigeria didn't have a problem with debt to GDP ratio. And Professor Kennedy, you repeated that this morning, that debt to GDP is fine. There's no question with it that others have a much worse figure, and that our challenge is with revenue. Fine. But already we are seeing the impact of our debt servicing. Yes, debt to GDP ratio is fine, but we are seeing the impact of our debt to our debt servicing obligations, eating up our revenue. How can we have an expanded revenue base even with ramped up collections when 2 things are happening? One, I mean, it's not, we have millions of poor people. When people are poor, that's what revenue are you going to get from them? 2, our industrial capacity utilization. When you are not producing and you are still import dependent, how can you get revenue? And then allied to that is what we are seeing with in terms of the service, the sectoral contributions to the GDP. Service sector, yes, the numbers are going up, but what is the percentage of the population, the working force, employed by the service sector? I remember an argument was made some years ago that our challenge in Nigeria is that we have left to the service sector and neglected the industrial base that ordinarily the service sector is supposed to deal on. Yeah, so how do we reconcile it? Are there things that government can also begin to look at? Because I'm saying this now, you can't have so many millions of poor people. You are bringing in money to ensure that the poverty level of all these persons is cushioned. You don't expect much revenue from them. And then industrial capacity utilization is low. The service sector is great, but what is it servicing?
Well, it's true, because if you have, typically you would expect a balance in the order of 20-25% agricultural contribution, then industries will sit at about 30-35, marginally higher, because after all, they are processing for each factory you have, and the manager has a cook, steward, driver, you have service, you have security, so there are more services on top of that. So that's the balance. And service coming down to about 45-50%. So that's how it's great, but it's not the same. I mean, even in America, 4% of the people are involved in agriculture, but they're able to feed the whole world if they decide that, instead of dumping the food every 4 years into the sea and paying subsidies to the farmers not to grow food that year. So the thing is that part of the answer is in increased mechanization of that, and then also to invest at world level in cottage industry production. Because I keep saying this, if cassava is produced, it's carrying 80% water. What are you going to do transporting it? The transport cost is too high, and if you don't touch it, if you don't process it, it goes bad within 1 day. You're going to have a world level processing strategy. And I've gone through this many times. I've gone to UNDP. They are doing multifunctional platform, put steel structure, put 3 grinding machine at world level using solar, and then that process. They have 11,000 of these in Mali, in 5,000 in Ghana, and but in Nigeria they're not. And then I've been talking to various ministers. So you need to do something there so that you can have that building block. Because if your grains are moving out without processing, ECOWAS treaty allows it to go without tax, without duty. And now AFCTA says all over Africa. You can stop that. The only way you can bring in a break is when they add value. Then you have to tax at the border. If they say no, don't tax me, then go and register for ETLS, ECOWAS Trade Restriction Scheme. So we have measure of control, and you may even demand dollar payment for the money for the things moving out, but you can't, because they use Naira to settle everybody at the border. So there are mileages in tightening that area. But in terms of the service sector is trying. I mean, look, First Bank alone employs over 160,000 agents sitting under the umbrella and doing POS. Multiply that by 21 banks. They're trying. And if you look at transaction, Nigeria number 6 in electronic transaction in the world. Even ahead of Brazil, ahead of America, we're number 6. We are doing 1.8 billion transactions every year, only second to China and India and all of that. So the scope for that, even under the plan by 2025, is to increase 400%. So they are making contribution, but it's still not enough to dent the figures that you are painting. But the linkage needs to be there. The ICT is doing well. Remember, it helped pull us out of recession very rapidly, and it has capacity to expand, and that's being dealt with. The tax around those are being handled by the Finance Act 2021, which says, we're only collecting tax on mode 3. Mode 3 is when businesses are here, settled here, you can see them, registered with CAC, then you can collect that. How about mode 1? People that sit out in their country and are giving services here, and we're not paying tax. I mean, I'm not saying that DSTZ is not paying tax, but this is an example of how you can sit in South Africa and do services here. Then you have people who carry their bag and briefcase, come here, do business, and go away, and they escape tax. They've captured all of those. So that's more revenue. And there are many more of these measures under the Ministry of Finance aggressive revenue mobilization. But more can be done. A lot more can be done. And I think it should be done around the area of this NNPC now, because it's throwing big spanner in the works with $4 trillion.
That's fine, Prof. Professor Ango, our last question to you. If you take a look at the draft medium-term expenditure framework, it will indicate that, again, we will rely a lot on, forex earnings from crude. The projection is that we will probably hit about maybe 1.6 million barrels. Meanwhile, we're yet to exhaust our production quota. So for between 2023 and 2025, what must we begin to do to shore up our production capacity to 1.8, which is what has been projected in the medium-term expenditure framework?
Well, I think what we need to do basically is to improve our drilling capacity. Our drilling capacity is reducing. How many rigs are working? I know relative to the capacity or the number that are installed, is maybe 7 of them as against 13 or 14 that are supposed to be working. So I think that is one thing we have to do. If there are some enabling thing that we need to do to enhance or to enable the producers to produce, if there's anything to clear, please let's clear them. I believe that is what will assist, in ensuring that we achieve at least our capacities. Then we have some facilities, condensates and things like that, that are available, in which we are not even limited, in terms of how much we can extract. I think we need to take advantage of those. Whatever we need to do in terms of policy, in terms of support, I think it should be done, to support and ensure that these kind of things are achieved. And I believe that is what we have to do. But, whatever our policies, whatever policies we come up with, the most important thing is the implementation strategies. We have to ensure that we are coming up with strategies in which there is understanding with all the parties, all the parties involved. They understand and they accept and they are supported within reason. Now, in terms of revenue projection, I still want to say that we are probably not challenging our revenue organizations that are collecting revenue enough. Every year you increase the target, for example, for customs or for federal revenue service. I think we need to do more. I agree there are quite a number of poor people, but there are quite a number of rich people who are not paying tax. I think the net need to catch up with everybody. We need to protect, that any revenue that's available. We cannot be the least, in this environment and think that we're doing everything is okay because we're having oil-related revenue coming in. I believe that should be.
My colleague Claire had said that was the last question for you, but you permit me to throw this in, and very briefly, I want to take advantage of you're also being into farming, something that you have disclosed on Good Morning Nigeria in the past. I'm just a bit curious, so that looking into the future, when perhaps the central bank then decides to take a back seat, from the interventions that we are seeing, anchor borrowers program and so on and so forth, it will not then be said, oh, you know, when the CBN was handling these things were working out well, X, Y, Z. Why is it that, for instance, in some of these interventions, like the anchor borrowers program, we hardly hear the voice of the Ministry of Agriculture?
Ideally, in implementing some of those initiatives, the Ministry of Agriculture should be very much involved. I believe they were involved in policy at the beginning, but beyond them, even the Bank of Agric, for example, should be a lot more involved. And there were suggestions, you know, that Bank of Agric, Bank of Industry should be more or less operating more like development banks that are more like commercial banks, also with branches and all things like that, so that they are not totally dependent on government. So I think there is need, you know, CBN is taking quite a lot, it has done quite well, but I think it is taking too much on itself, you know, perhaps investing or virtually intervening in all sectors may not be sustainable, you know, in the long run. So bringing every party in and probably transforming the Bank of Agric and Bank of Industry, you know, so that they become more commercially oriented, you know, and then so that CBN will just be giving them intervention funds so that they can manage will be better. And I hope to see a situation whereby like was stated earlier, now we now begin to do some backward looking at the chain overall, not just production of farm products, but also processing them, you know. So any intervention, I think more intervention should be done towards processing what we are producing, so that way the value chain will be better and there will be some addition that are made to what is being produced locally. Thank you.
Professor Isao Ango, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship, Dean, School of Postgraduate Studies, Kaduna State University, joining us from our Kaduna Network Center. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And also Professor Ken Ife, Development Economist and Development Consultant. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. And that does it for our conversation. For now, let's take a bit of news from the world of sports.